Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Jesus Talk YouTube channel. My name is Luke Denowden, and today we're going to be discussing who Jesus is. Now, obviously, you don't know who Jesus is, you click on the right video. Before we get into the video, make sure you just, give the support to the channel. Make sure people share it to like a couple friends, for people who don't know who Jesus is. Share it to a couple friends, be like, hey, want to learn more about Jesus? Here's a video, he's going to discuss it for you. I'm trying my absolute hardest to tell you the entire story of Jesus at the top of my head. I know it pretty decently well. I just finished my reading of John, so this story of Jesus is going to come directly from the book of John, not from any other gospel. But first, we got to talk about the gospels, and we also got to talk about where are we in the Bible. So let's get right onto it. So if you're wondering where we are in the Bible, we are all the way in the Gospels, in the New Testament. Now, what are the Gospels? The Gospels are 4 books that describe who Jesus is. There is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are synoptic gospels. You don't know what that word means? That pretty just means that the gospels are the same. They sound pretty similar. They have similar testimonies, so just different stories kind of interweaved. And then John is not a synoptic gospel. He's just a gospel. He explains Jesus in a very different way. He actually explains it the best, in my opinion. Although explaining it perfectly, he describes Jesus, who Jesus is, what he does for us, and also just like a bunch of other chords that really help solidify who is Jesus. So let's tell the story of Jesus, starting with his birth. That's the only time we're going to go to the other 3 gospels, because all 3 of those gospels talk about his birth. Let's start with Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and let's talk about the story of Jesus being born. So Caesar issued a decree that a census would be taken across the entire Roman Empire. And so what this means is like, okay, a census, you know what a census is, right? Everyone knows what a census is. So during this time, there was a woman named Mary. She was a virgin. And one night when she was asleep, she was just greeted by an angel in the middle of the night. And the angel's name was Gabriel. And then it was like, Mary, you're going to have a child. And Mary's like, well, that's impossible. I'm a virgin. I don't have a husband. And angel's like, nope, you're going to have a kid. So you are going to be there with the man. I will find you a man. And Mary's like, okay, I trust you, God. And the angel went away. And then the angel appeared toward Joseph. And it's like, hey, Joseph, wake up. Take Mary to Bethlehem. She's going to have a kid. And Joseph is just like, okay, I'll do that. So they took him on a donkey, and off they went. And when they got to Bethlehem, a kid was born. They named him Jesus, just as the angel told them to. I forgot to mention that. The angel told them to name him Jesus, so people know who he was. Alright, so that's the story of Jesus being born. It's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. We're now going to skip over his kid years. His kid years are interesting. Very interesting kid year stories we could tell. But we're just going to read off of John. I don't have a Bible on me, so it's just purely based of everything I know in John, because it's my favorite book in the Bible. So here we go. So we're first going to start off with John the Baptist, actually. We're not going to talk about Jesus right now. We're talking about John. John the Baptist was seen as people as the Messiah, but he said he wasn't the Messiah. And people are like, what, are you Elijah? No, not Elijah. Okay, well, who are you? And John the Baptist says, I am John the Baptist. I baptize you with water, but the one who's coming is going to baptize you with the Holy Spirit. This raised people's hope, being like, oh snap, he may not be the Messiah, but maybe he might be coming soon. Who knows? Eventually, a little while later, Jesus came. Jesus came to John the Baptist. And then John looked at Jesus and said, look, here is the man I was telling you guys about. And everyone looked at him like he just looks like a normal guy. Some people are like, I don't know. Some people are like, okay, I'll take your word for it. I mean, you were right about this in the past. You could be right about it now. And then a little while later, Jesus went to John the Baptist to be baptized. And John was just like, okay. Odd how the Son of Man has came to be baptized by a human. But okay. So he baptized him, and the instant that Jesus was lifted out of the water, a light shone from heaven. And God looked down on Jesus and says, "You are my beloved son. With you I am well pleased." And people are like, "Oh my goodness, he must be the Messiah." Unfortunately, the people that saw that believed. No one else knew that happened. Because apparently, I don't think anyone else really told anybody what happened. I don't quite know. It doesn't really stay. Then a little while later, Jesus decides, you know what, I'm going to get 12 guys, 12 disciples of mine. So he starts going around picking out disciples. I can't name them all, but the important ones that we should know is Peter, John, Andrew, Philip, and Judas. Those are the 5 that are like most commonly known. I can't really name off the rest of the top of my head, unfortunately. I don't quite know the rest of their names. Very sorry about that. I only got 5 for the 12 down, but it's not that bad. Not that bad. Not that bad. But after that, Jesus is like, "Follow me where I go. I'll teach you things you will learn." And they're like, "Okay, let's do it. Why not?" And so off they went. Jesus decided that he wanted to make sure like his time was ready for him to start performing his miracles. But that time was a little bit What happened is that during a wedding? Yeah, it was a wedding. During a wedding, the wine ran out. And there was like, "Oh, snap. We're out of wine. What are we gonna do?" And someone spoke up. I believe it was Mary. I believe it was his mom. And then he's like, "Jesus will tell you what to do." And she's like, "It's not time yet." He's like, "Nope, it's time now." It's like, "Okay, geez, let's do it." Yeah. So he goes over, he pours water into big like vases, and he closes it. He prays, opens it, scoops out some wine, puts it in a thing, like serve it to people. If you're like, "Huh? What just happened? You just turned water into wine. That's up. You're a magician." And he's like, "Oh, I'm not a magician, but you'll soon find out who I really am. You'll soon find out." And everyone's just astonished by that miracle. Everyone's astonished, being like chatting around people during the wedding, being like, "That was a crazy miracle, guys, wasn't that? That was insane." And there's like, "Yeah, that was crazy. Who do you think he is?" And then people were just having like a bunch of like different theories at the table, being just like, "Oh, he must be this, must be this." In reality, he was a Messiah, but then again, it wasn't his time, so he didn't say anything. Then finally his time came. Usually Jesus will walk around being just like, he would like start preaching, like trusting God and all, which is great. His first real sign of him being God is when he fed the multitude. I know I'm kind of skipping ahead quite a bit. I know he does heal a blind man beforehand, but that didn't get people right on the jump. I think the multitude got people on the jump. So what the multitude is that there was a big crowd of people that was with Jesus, and they want to hear him teach. So he was teaching, and then a little bit while later, it's like, these folks must be hungry. We've been sitting here for quite a while, and they might be just a smidge hungry. And so it's like, well, all we have is this kid with this fish and this loaf of bread. I don't know how we're gonna feed 5,000 people with these 2 things. And Jesus like, "Give them to me." And it's like, okay, gives to Jesus, prays to God, and blesses the meal. And he's like, "Pass it around." And he puts it in baskets, pass it around. Everyone was fed. Every single person of the 5,000 people that were there were fed. By the way, 5,000 is probably like a rounded up number. So there's probably a little bit more than 5,000. But it was still in the 5,000 range. That is crazy. And people are like, "Oh my goodness, when this guy is teaching and doing that, he might be the Messiah." But people weren't quite exactly sure. But some people started believing even harder now. And then the Pharisees got involved because of one thing Jesus did, and that was destroy the temple marketplace. This is one of my favorite stories of Jesus because it's just insane what he did. So Jesus decided to go to the temple with his followers, with his disciples, And he looks up out at the crowd and he sees people selling like animals, selling like clothing, fruits, goods. And he just looks around being like, how dare you do this to my father's house? I have enough. So he walks up to one of the tables, grabs it, and just flips it over. And he like destroys things, gets like, I believe he got like a whip and like whipped some of the tables as well, like broke them. And the Pharisees walked in there like, what are you doing? And Jesus like, how dare you do that to my father's house? How dare you do that to my father's house? My father's house is a place of worship, not a marketplace. And they're just like, who do you think you are? And he's like, and they're just like braiding him like, very well then. 3 days, I'll destroy his temple and raise it back up again. And they're just like, how can you do that? There's no way. Get away. And then what he meant, he wasn't talking about the temple. He was talking about himself. He was pretty much giving them a sign. 3 days, I'm gonna die and raise back up again. People didn't know what he meant. People had no idea what he meant. Until a while later, but we'll get to that. The Pharisees are talking like, who is this Jesus guy? Like, what do we do? What are we gonna do? Like, he's just walking around and just teaching about God. Is his teachings correct? Like, they didn't quite they didn't quite know how to try to trust him. And then like after that, not in the book of John, I didn't see in the book of John, but in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus like insults a fig tree, which is kind of funny. Also, the 4 days in the desert, that wasn't in there because that wasn't quite what John was going after. So after Jesus destroyed the entire temple marketplace, the Pharisees started following him around, being like, who is this guy? Okay, odd. He eats with sinners. That's odd. He's healing people on the Sabbath. That's against God's law. He's committing crime to the Lord. He's breaking God's law. He was doing that for a reason. We're going to talk about that reason in a minute. He broke the law because he was the law and the law couldn't stop him. The problem is that they didn't know he was actually God until way later. So, after they start following him around being like, now what? And then they heard him say, I am the Son of God. They start hearing him like say that, like, hey, I am the Son of God. Everyone who believes in me will believe in the Father. And they're just like, he's committing blasphemy. He's committing blasphemy. No way. And then they started to like sneak out a bit more, like, is he really being blasphemous? And they see him, and it's like, he is. He claims he's the Son of God. We must stop him. Eventually, Jesus overhears, is like, yeah, I know about this. So then he gathers his disciples together, and he's like, do you know who I am? Kind of like an awkward silence for a little bit. Then Peter steps forward. He's like, Lord, you are the Messiah. And Jesus said, don't tell anybody. And they're like, okay. You want to know why? Because it wasn't time yet. It wasn't time for people to know that he was Son of God. He was going to tell them himself. He started walking around the place being just like, oh yeah, I'm the Son of God. And people were just like, okay. People were like, no way. And the Pharisees were like, So he then performed other miracles like healing the blind, he healed the lame, like he walked around teaching people. It was awesome. We're now going to fast forward to the Last Supper, the Passover supper. Jesus is sitting at the table, he has all of his disciples around the table, and they all are just having a good time. They're chatting, they're laughing. And then Jesus stands up, and he begins to speak. And he says this, one of you will betray me. His followers are just like, no way. One of us is going to betray? Wait, what? Is it you? Is it you? Like, they're kind of like whispering to her, like, who's it going to be? He's a Messiah. He knows. He's a Messiah. He knows. Is it you? You better not. And Jesus said this: I'm going to give a piece of bread to somebody, or a piece of bread. First person I give it to is going to betray me. And he gives it right to Judas. The moment Judas grabbed the bread, Satan entered him. And Jesus said to him, whatever you got to do, just do it quick, get it over with. His disciples were just like, oh, okay, he's probably going to go pay for the food. Hang on here. I'm not trying to diss the disciples here, but just hang on here. Jesus literally said, the first person that I'm going to rip a piece of bread off and I'm going to give to somebody and that person's going to betray me. And he gives it right to Judas. So that you guys are following. Hang on here. Sorry about that. I'm just getting kind of passionate right now. He gives it right to Judas. And they're just like, oh, okay, Judas, go pay the bill. That was not what he meant by whatever you got to do it quickly. And then he gets the bread. He breaks it out, like, this is my body given to you, and he passes it out to the rest of the disciples. And now that he passes out the bread, people are start questioning, like, oh, hang on here. Who did he give it first to again? Like, they completely forgot. And then Jesus grabbed the wine, like, this is my blood poured out to you. And they all cheers, drank it. Oh, good. The blood was the wine, by the way. The wine represented the blood. Okay, so we're not going to fast forward to the garden. That was about near where the Passover was. He went to the Olive Garden. He sat down and he just prayed to God. He prayed to God. He prayed to the Lord that what's going to happen is going to happen. It's about time, and I'm ready. He just stood up, turns around. The time has come. And the moment he said that, they all turned. Judas is standing with a bunch of officers, with swords, helmets, shield, a bunch of servants as well. He's just standing there looking kind of like upset, mad. And then Jesus says, who are you looking for? The soldiers replied, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And then Jesus steps forward and says, I am. And the soldiers fell to their feet. Fell off their feet completely. Like they got knocked back over and fell around their butt. And Jesus said, who are you looking for? And they once again said, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, not knowing that he's standing right in front of them. And he said, I am. And then they're just like, oh, snap. That's him. That's him. That is him right there. Let's get him. Let's get this guy. And then Peter pulls out a sword out of, I don't know, he just had the sword the whole time. I don't quite know. It doesn't really say. And he slices off a servant boy's ear. And he's like, no, don't do that. He calls the servant boy up, heals his ear, and you're like, that's the guy. So they grab him and they take him away. And then he was brought to the high council. And of course, they wanted to put him to death, but they can't. It's not up to them to put him to death. They had to make sure that the Roman governor has to, which was Pilate. So they brought him over to Pilate, and it's like, this guy, he says he's the Son of God. He claims to be equal as God. He's blasphemous. He must be put to death. Kill him. Kill him. And they were chanting it too. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. That's what they were doing. They were chanting. The whole crowd was literally chanting, kill him. Kill. It was insane. Reading that was actually bonkers. I did not expect them to always chanting, kill him. Kill him. Imagine this. You're in Jesus' shoes. And you know that this is going to happen. And you start hearing the whole crowd behind you chanting, kill him, kill him. What would you be feeling? What if you weren't Jesus? What if you weren't? Okay, scratch that. You're not Jesus in this scenario. You are just some random criminal about to be crucified for your crimes all the way back in Bible times. And the whole crowd behind you chanting, kill him, kill him, kill him. Imagine that. Imagine that. That's crazy. And so Jesus said that he was not guilty. I'm just kidding. He didn't. He didn't say he wasn't guilty. He didn't say he was guilty. He didn't say anything. That it was like, something that Pontius could get him on. But he started talking to Pontius about who he was and who God is. And then Pontius is like, this guy's completely innocent. This guy's completely innocent. But I can't do anything. These madmen behind me are chanting to kill him. I can't do anything about this. So I guess I gotta kill him. And so what he did, he washed his hands as a sign saying, "This is not my fault, and I am crucified." And now here comes the serious part of the story, and I want you to very, very attention. Very good attention, okay? Listen ears on. Open up the ears. Let's get serious now. No more cuts. We're going to talk now. So, this is when the story gets really serious. Jesus carried the cross all the way up to Calvary Hill. People are mocking him. They get like a crown of thorns to put on his head. And they laid him on the cross. He didn't fight at all. Nailed in the cross. Right on his hands. Right on his feet. And they nailed a sign at the top of the cross that said, "Jesus Christ, King of the Jews." And people are like, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they are mocking him. And they're like, "If you really are God, smite these guys down and save yourself." You know what's crazy? He could have done that. He actually had every opportunity to do that, but he didn't. Jesus then looked up at God from the heaven and said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." He was then thirsty. They got like a stick with a sponge on it, soaked with wine. He drank some, and after he drank some, he then yelled, "It is finished," and lumped over and died. Jesus has died for you and me. And you're probably wondering, what does that mean? Let me explain. Jesus was hung on a cross. That's what everyone else saw, but that's not what God saw. Do you want to know what God saw? God saw the stain of sin put onto Jesus now. The sin that everybody has committed. My sin. Your sin. The people that are currently walking right past my van window right now. There's a couple walking their dogs. Their sins are forgiven too. Everybody's. Even your future sins are completely forgiven too. Everything. And as Jesus was laying there, he was being buried in sin. And he died in that sin. And obviously, since the punishment of sin is death, Jesus died alone away from God. And yeah, that's what happened. But that's not the end of the story, is it? No. 3 days later, 2 women came walking up to the tomb that Jesus was laying in. They looked in the tomb, and Jesus was gone. And they immediately start freaking out, because in their thoughts like, "Oh my goodness, did someone steal his body?" Then an angel came down and says, "Jesus isn't here anymore." And they're just like, "No, where can he be?" And one of them started breaking down crying. And then a man stepped forward and said, "Ma'am, what's wrong?" And then what this woman says, like, "Sir, if you have Jesus' body, please just give it back." And then this man said, "Mary." That's the woman's name, by the way. Mary. And Mary looked up and realized she's actually talking to Jesus. She was talking to him the entire time. He's alive. He's alive. And Mary was like, "Lord." And so he started to worship him all of a sudden. And then he's like, No. Now's not the time. I have to go. I have to tell my disciples that I'm alive. Tell the disciples I'm alive. Tell the truth to everybody. I gotta go. And so Mary runs back to the place being like, "Jesus, he's alive." And people are like, "Really? He's alive? No way." But some of them didn't believe it. One of them, I believe, I don't know his name. I think it was Thompson? Was that his name? Thompson? I think it was Thompson. I'm going to go with Thompson. I don't think that's the right name. Correct me. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he was like, I will not believe it until I see the hole in his hands and feet. Jesus appeared to him the next day, being like, hey, how you doing? Hi. And Thomas is like, Lord? It's like, look. And there was holes in his hands and in his feet. And he's like, Lord, it is you. Oh my goodness. And he's like, yes, it is me. Relax. It is fine. And he was so cool about it. They're like, no, it's revolutionary. You are alive. And he's like, yeah, I know. That's crazy. He just did not care that he just like rose back from the dead. Like, hi, hello. Hello. And they're just like, Lord, you're alive. Then, that's kind of where the gospel ends, but we're gonna like continue back into Acts, because that's not quite where the story of Jesus ends. The story of Jesus keeps going a little bit further. So Jesus then brings the disciples together, and he's like, disciples, I must go to my Father. You're on your own, but spread the good news. Spread the good news that I died for your sins. I am saving the world. I will come back one day and destroy sin for good. I will destroy sin for good. I'll destroy evil for good. And I will reign victorious over the devil. But you guys need to help me. Spread the good news. And they were like, okay. Lord, what should we say? Say that Jesus died for your sins. He rose again and conquered death once and for all. They're like, okay. He then blessed each of his disciples and ascended into the clouds. And that, my friends, is the story of Jesus. Man, dude, what a story. It gives you chills every time, just like learning about who God is. And all of this video for you guys, it is so freaking hot in this stinking car. I am breaking a sweat right now, and I need to end this video now. But first, we talk a little bit about the crucifixion. So you don't know what happened after he died. I think you probably might not know this, especially if you're like a new Christian. An earthquake happened, and then the veil in the temple ripped from top to bottom, and this is like a really thick veil. It's pretty thick. And then one of the Roman officers looking up, and he says that surely this man was the Son of God. He was. He came to the realization too late. Now, if you're also wondering how crucifixion works, it's kind of like being hung, but you're like laying kind of limp like this, and you can't quite like breathe because, of course, you're exhausted hanging like this, so you're like suffocating. It's horrible. And another part of the story about the crucifixion, there was two criminals left and right of Jesus. They're also being hung for horrible crimes. One of the prisoners looked over at Jesus, started like mocking him, being like, "Oh, you're a son of God. Save us and save yourself." The other prisoner looks over at him like, "No, we're guilty. We deserve this. This man is completely innocent. He does nothing." He looks over at Jesus and said, "Jesus, remember me as I come into your kingdom." And then Jesus looks back over him and says, "Very well. I have a place for you in my kingdom." That's all he had to say to him. And now he's up in heaven with Jesus, completely forgiven. Isn't that beautiful? Jesus died for all of us. He died for you. He died for me. He died for everybody. So we can all be free of sin and spread the good news of Jesus. And that, my friends, is the story of Jesus, who he is. I'm happy you guys stuck through to the very end of this video. I've been recording for quite a hot minute. But I love you guys. And thank you guys so much for watching. God bless you all. Everybody, have a great day.